Paris Perspective.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Paris Perspective with me, David Coffey. Well, migration has become one of the most hotly debated issues of modern times. Now, in the Middle East, the rise of the Islamic State armed group, coupled with the failed popular insurrection against Syria's dictator Bashar al-Assad, and all that coupled with the aftermath of the failed Western-backed military interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan, this all led to a tsunami of refugees making the long and perilous journey towards Europe in search of a better life. Now, as that wave of refugees and migrants crashed on European shores, reaching its peak back in 2015, the welcome was a mixed bag, as fears of Islamist infiltration permeated the anti-migrant political debate and led to the exponential rise, one could say, of populist movements across the continent. Now, the novel Exiles from Paradise explores the confrontation between enlightened Islam and radicalism. It's a tale of two Franco-Iranian friends, Farhad and Reza, who take on diverging interpretations of Islam and its history going back centuries, and of course the challenges of being marginalised in modern society and their sense of exile. Now, to discuss the background to her novel Exiles from Paradise, and indeed the shifting sands of migration across generations, I'm joined today by Brigitte Adès, who is the London Bureau Chief with Politique Internationale. Thank you very much for joining me today.
I'm very happy to be with you.
Well, Brigitte, this is a fantastic novel that was written in French, launched down in the southern city of Arles, and it's now been translated into English. But the novel itself, I mean, we're talking about some very contemporary issues, and it is definitely something that Paris Perspective would really like to focus on. Your book brings the reader to Isfahan, to London, and to Paris, with the protagonists really giving a critical snapshot of the cities through their experience. Now, first and foremost, what inspired you to write Exiles from Paradise?
I felt that after 9/11, societies were making an amalgam between radical Islam and Muslims, our Muslims, the Muslims that have been living with us for so many years and decades. And I felt that it was very unfair and it was going to lead to a lot of problems. So I thought the best way was to write a story to show their side of the story, their side of the problem of identity that they would feel when they were coming to live here or were born here, but they felt neither from there, neither from here. And they had to find a place in their societies. And our part was very important to play, the part of the people, autochtone, our part, to actually welcome these people. And so the best way was to get them to be understood. And the best way was to write a novel to get to understand the culture and where they came from.
And indeed, understanding the culture, we're going to get to that. You had some very interesting experiences when researching the book. But now you are saying as the autochtone, as us, the indigenous inhabitants, if you will, of Europe. How did you find, or how different do you reckon the ordeals of migrants or people from migrant families are in, say, the UK compared to France? Because there's always this old thing about multiculturalism versus full integration. Multiculturalism in the sake of, or in the face of the UK, or you are subject to the Queen, where in France it is full integration, so you're subject to the law. Which experience is better?
That's a very interesting question. I have to say that I lived in both countries for a long time. So I see the communitarism, the communities that we create in the UK are very comfortable for Muslims. But they feel that they're living in a mini Islamabad, as I say in the book. They are totally ostracized from the rest of the population. And they are tolerated, they are actually welcome, but they are not really integrated. And as a result, it leads to problems. Although I think the Muslims in the UK are more well-off than the Muslims in France in general. They've done very well economically, but they have their own stores, their own clothes. And I find that, because they are not from in Pakistan anymore or in Afghanistan anymore, there is a bit of a discrepancy. And we have seen on both sides, whether it's Paris, or your French experience or the UK experience, it doesn't work very well.
Both are flawed, essentially.
Both are flawed. That's the thing.
But I mean, can one approach the problems with the same ammunition, if you will, with the same solutions, or do they have to be approached differently because of the societies in which they live?
That's the thing. I think the UK is so used to the colonial past and the sort of respect. There is a big respect of communities, but at the same time, I find that both. I don't see any solution in either. I think the best solution is to make sure that we have to address the respect. It's so important that I've read this book of Fukuyama recently, Identity. It's so amazing that they say that it's a need as eating, drinking, the recognition, to be recognized as a human being, to be glorified, if I say. And if you're not, if you feel that you're completely ignored, there is a tendency for some individuals to become totally mad, and they'd rather do a bad deed than no deed at all.
Yes.
And that's what leads to extremes.
Now, indeed, you touched on something there that I think is quite interesting. You said that in Britain, the Muslim population is usually more wealthy, but it still remains ghettoized to a point where even though they may be more affluent, they still stay within their own districts, the same areas. Now, but the one thing that is remarkable for me, especially kind of looking in this election year here in France, like you have Sadiq Khan, who is a Muslim mayor of London, which itself is like an enclave of cosmopolitan, forward-thinking Britain, surrounded by the Brexiteers. But he is a Muslim. Sadiq Khan is a very vocal, very engaged Muslim man who's in charge. Do you think the same thing could happen here at the Mairie de Paris, that we could ever have a Muslim mayor in charge of the town hall?
I think that it may happen in a few years, but I find that the difference between Sadiq Khan and our Muslims in Europe, in the continental Europe, and especially in France, is that there is Sadiq Khan is vocal, but he's vocal in a very multicultural way. Whereas our Muslims, I find that they're very much more traditional in their approach of Islam. And as a result, it would take longer because there is more of a risk of a lack of, openness. I had a taxi driver, love to speak to taxi driver, and they're always very, very nice and enlightened. And this one was happy, was voting for Macron, which I thought a very mainstream man. And we were talking about everything. We agreed on a lot of things on politics and international politics. But then he said, the Pakistanis, when they became, they had a Muslim, the Islamist regime, that's when they became right. And he was saying, they cut the hands of thieves, they cut the throats of rapists. That's what should be done in France. So you see, this man he had a fantastic speech, suddenly he became very extreme.
Once it came to dealing with his community's issues.
Yes, and also the fact that he thought these people were rightly the wrong type of people, the thieves or whatever, but it was very radical in the way they were going to fight these people.
And this threads into my next question. Tell us about your experiences when researching Islamic communities for your book, Exiles from Paradise. I think what you've said in the past is that it's this insidious nature of radicalization that just comes and grows in normal, whatever one would like to call a normal mosque, that you don't really see. So tell us about your experience.
Yes, I was. I wanted to research about Islam and the way it was preached because I thought it was crucial, and I was in the UK, so I went to a lot of mosques and I went to the bookstores of the mosques, and I was quite happy because at the beginning I went to Regent's Park and I saw that the Sunni and Shiites were talking to each other. They were very friendly and everything was fine. And then I went to the bookstore and then I realized that a lot of the books that were there were very, very subversive. They were books about jihad, about the fact that you should be integrating, because if you integrate, then you're just bad Muslims, and things that I thought was very, very subversive, because these Muslims are there to stay. They have to be integrated. They have to be part of the UK. But if you are told that nobody wants them, that they are not welcome, and they won't feel recognized and welcome. So I thought it was and then I researched more, and I realized because of the financing of the mosques by Saudis families, and then the fact that even there is in the imam, actually there is a spy in each mosque and in each room of prayer room, where they hear what he's preaching. And if he doesn't preach the Wahhabite,
and that is the Saudis, a Wahhabi.
They lose their job.
Yeah.
And as a result, nobody knows there is a spy except the preacher, the imam. So.
A little aside here. I mean, you're talking about, now you say you've got the Wahhabists that have their spies in there because they're being funded by the Saudis. This is the mosques in the UK. Just a quick question. The books that you saw, were they written in English or in Arabic?
They were written in English.
They're written in English. So, I mean, it must
be... They were translated.
Yeah, translated. So I'm sure they'll be able to find whichever publishing company actually put them forward if they needed to get back to the paper trail to where it came to. But a quick question, bringing it here to France. One of the main debates that has been on the table here in France, especially since the 2015 terrorist attacks, has been an Islam de France, a French Islam, which of course will have no strings being pulled, or at least they would hope not, directly from Riyadh or elsewhere. Do you think Islam de France will ever actually take root, and will it ever actually get rid of radicalization?
I think it's a good start. I think it has to be encouraged. I think it's difficult because there are a lot of different branches and they don't get along, but it's often the case when there is power somewhere and money. But I think it's unavoidable that we have to try, because I think Islam is a fantastic religion when it's enlightened. In my book, I show that the hero goes back to his roots, realizes that there is an enlightened Islam. There are a lot of branches. There is also the Mu'tazilists in France that are trying to to reform Islam or to make it more able to adapt to modernity. Mm-hmm. But there is also this Islam of, that you're not supposed to even understand what you pray, what you read. The free will is totally to be avoided. And all this is something that has to be fought. So I think if there is an Islam de France, with the idea of even accepting the laicity in the common places, and just praying inside your home or in the mosques, that would be a good thing. But I don't see it happen in a day. It will take a while.
It's like the modernization of all religions. It's like Catholicism pre-Vatican II. It was about putting the Bible into vernacular. It takes time. It takes centuries, and unfortunately, takes a lot of blood and tears at some stages in our history. Now, speaking of history, your personal family history is steeped in stories of displacement and migration. Now, you can tell us about your history, but I mean, as a French writer and journalist living in London, this is a bit of a trick question. Do you feel of yourself as an expat or a migrant or neither?
Good question. I think I feel like an expat because I feel very profoundly European and French, but it took a while. I am a third generation Jewish Sephardic living in France. And as I said, the French are very welcoming when people are assimilating, which was what my grandparents did. But my grandparents were still migrants. I guess my parents were born in France, so they were more ingrained into French system. And the culture was totally French. We have no idea of speaking Greek because we came from Rhodes in Greece. Mm-hmm. We were from first 1492 Spanish Jews that were expelled by Isabel the Catholic. But what is interesting is that I feel French, but I still feel a lot about exile. I really feel for these people. I really want them to be understanding the society where they are in now, to be able to feel, to be able to be comfortable. Because I believe that, like Plutarch believes that you are from where you are born. Yes. Like when I think about Archimedes, he was from Sicily. Do we ever think about Archimedes from Sicily? That's the thing. But now I think we have to think about Archimedes from Sicily. And it's a different way of thinking. Because
And again, to your family life, not getting too personal here, but in modern times, I mean, you yourself, you married an Iranian man. And of course, there's a massive Iranian community, well, definitely here in Paris as well, in London. One could say specifically dating back to 1979, where there was a big influx following the fall of the Shah. But just from your experience now, you're married to an Iranian who is himself in exile, be it self-imposed or otherwise. How do Iranians view Iran today from the outside looking in? How do they feel that the West has treated Iranians and how it's treated Iran? I mean, we've got a list here. We can get it up. We have, Iran has the right to uranium enrichment. It signed up to the 2015 nuclear deal. It was kicked out of the 2015 nuclear deal by the former president of the USA. Now they're trying to get them back to the table. But there is also, of course, proxy wars happening in Yemen. You've got the power struggle that's happening in northern Syria going to Latakia. They have their straight road in there. They want to be near their friends Hezbollah up in northern Lebanon, etc., etc. I mean, I've got a lot of Iranian friends, erudite, clever, engaging, debating. They love questioning. They're great fun. How do they look at Iran today from the outside in? And how does your husband feel about how the West has been treating things in Tehran?
So it's interesting because it has fluctuated, but always there were a very big bond between the Iranians of the diaspora and Iranians inside. I guess they're really deciphering between the regime, which they don't like and they hate, and the Iranian people. And they very often feel sorry for the Iranian people, especially when they hear there are a lot of inflation, there is a lot of problems, economic problems, and so on and so forth. We have also, when I was the Iran-Iraq war, I was at Oxford with my husband, so I could see that he was very upset with the way they had actually encouraged Saddam Hussein's invasion of Iran, attack. It's not invasion, it was more an attack. Yeah. And they really wanted Iran to prevail. So it's interesting because at the same time, for example, for the nuclear deal, they are not in favor of the Iranian having the atomic bomb at all. Although they know that they would not use it in the wrong way because they are really very trusting in the Iranian wisdom in general. And I think it's true. They are not worried that it would actually, but they're worried about proliferation. Yeah. Saudi Arabia acquiring the bomb. Pakistan has it. A lot of people, Egypt would want it. So that's what worries them. But I find it interesting to see that there is a big solidarity still with the culture, I find it profoundly Iranian. My husband still is after 30 years of exile.
Yes, so well, that's it. It's still there. It's still there, running deep. And looking here, identity politics. It's one of these buzzwords of modern times. We have to mention the elections here in France. I mean, they are coming up only in a couple of months' time here for President Macron looking to get a second mandate. But what he is really battling against now is a shift, a massive shift to the far right here in French politics. Even the centre-right candidate Valérie Pécresse is known now for kind of giving little winks and nudges to the extreme right because everybody has to play this very hard right ticket. And specifically looking to shut the door almost completely on all migrants just to get past the first round and getting the first votes. How does that make you feel?
I'm upset to see the recuperation, the way it's using the migrant fear of migrant or invasion to play for their own benefit. Yeah. And I think it's sad. I think it's sad that it works. I see that the Brexit occurred because there was this horrible poster pretending that there would be hordes of migrants from Syria as soon as when they were not even in Schengen. So it was ridiculous that they were doing that, but it worked. Yeah. So because it was a few people that actually shifted. So it was enough to change the fate of Europe and so on. So I think there is a big problem. I think it's I wouldn't even say it's a just and fair game. It's actually dangerous, but it works. And that's what I'm upset with Zemmour, for example, because I think it's from somebody who comes from immigration himself.
I mean, he's of North African Jewish.
Yes, he should never behave like that. But at the same time, he's using fear and he's pushing the right buttons. So now I think that the right buttons have to be pushed by everyone in a way to appease. You have to say these migrants have to be accepted. We know the French have a history of migrations because we are the last country after there was a sea, so everybody came and stayed.
Yeah.
So as a result, we have a lot of Italians, we had Portuguese, we had the Spanish, and look at Madame Hidalgo is a Spanish, second generation Spanish.
Paris, yeah.
And Monsieur Valls as well was the prime minister, was Spanish. So we have that. So I think there is no reason why we shouldn't be, but we have a part to play, but also the Muslim has a part to play.
Yeah. Now, this is going to be one of, I think we'll wrap up with this question, but seeing that you are the London bureau chief, I think it is, it's good to end with something about your experience in London. You talked about the lies there. I mean, that Britain wasn't even part of Schengen, that these migrants were not all flooding into the UK. Of course, there was the big red bus, which famously just basically sold the entire population, what we say in English, a lemon. Now, that's because it was a lie. On a personal level, do you feel that the mood has changed towards migrants in Britain since Brexit just over a year ago?
I think the mood has changed. I think there are less Europeans in the streets of London, at least, and in the UK in general. I think there was more of a unleashing of a kind of open debates and discussions, and before they were thinking about it, but they didn't really want to talk about it. But at the same time, I feel that the British are very tolerant people. And they are tolerant, now. They have a lot of more Chinese. Asians are going to flow, and they are. European, not as much, but they're still around and they are still fine. And American people are coming in for some reason. But I really feel that there is. It's not as in France, maybe because now there is no election as well. That's
Indeed.
also the reason.
Not yet. Even though Boris seems to be getting out and in and out of hot water on a regular basis, but he hasn't been pulled off the podium just yet. Brigitte Adès, London bureau chief with Politique Internationale and author of Exiles from Paradise. Thank you for being on Paris Perspective today.
I was very happy to come.
It was great to have you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for logging on to Paris Perspective. And you can access all of our episodes on rfienglish.com/podcasts, and indeed wherever you get your podcasts. I'm David Coffey. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time.